Death is one of life's greatest teachers. When we turn toward death and dying with honesty and courage, it has the power to deepen our connection to ourselves, to one another, and to the very force of life. In its presence, we are invited into profound depths of healing, transformation, and wholeness. Yet in the moments that accompany death and transformative loss, whether facing our own mortality, grieving the death of a beloved, or walking alongside someone in their grief or in their final days, it can feel as if the ground beneath us is giving way. And in many ways, it is. These passages call us to root ever deeper into our hearts, to confront the vast unknown, and to seek meaning amidst the great pain of impermanence. Having a compassionate companion during such times can make all the difference. As a death doula and threshold counselor, I walk with people through life's most tender crossings. I offer presence, steadiness, and rituals of reconnection as we navigate the fears, uncertainties, and sorrows that so often live in the shadows of death and dying. Whether through meaningful conversation, practical guidance, or co-creative acts of remembrance, my intention is to help weave meaning and cultivate peace while honoring the mystery. For me, this is sacred work, to accompany others with humility, respect, reverence, and unwavering care as they move through these necessary and transformative thresholds. Together we meet grief and fear with tenderness, explore the important questions that arise, and open space for the cultivation of fertile ground where beauty and connection can take root and eventually bloom, even here in the midst of loss. Francis Weller says that bringing grief and death out of the shadows is our spiritual responsibility, our sacred duty. It is from this ground that today's conversation arises. So, let's introduce today's guest. Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I'm your host, Tay Tayari, and today's guest is Jovan Sage. Jovan invites us to reimagine death, not as something to resist, but as an ally to walk with. Grounded in the four foundations of deathwork, death as teacher, letting go as art, uncertainty as lesson, and the calling as guide, she shares how these principles shape her practice as a death midwife, as well as her way of life. Drawing from her background as a queer organizer and her work with breath and relational practices, Jovan reflects on how queerness radicalizes her relationship with death and life, how uncertainty clarifies what matters, and how tending to fear with tenderness opens us to deeper love. At its heart, this is a conversation about becoming more death literate, remembering grief and love as kin, and living in a way that prepares us to die with integrity and deep, reverent connection to life and love. Jovan Sage is a heart consoler, death midwife, and grief weaver who threads sacred space and heart medicine together. Their work is to guide those who are navigating deep transformation and tender thresholds of grief. Their practice is grounded in Black ancestral healing and land practices, queer liberation, and intimacy with the natural world. Jovan's teaching centers tending to our body's way knowing and our communities of ancestors, people, plant, and animal kin. So, let's wade out into uncertainty together, meet our fears with presence, and practice the tender art of surrender with Jovan Sage as we welcome death as an ally in this life. I'd like to bring in these 4 core principles of death work that you share on your site, and that, as far as I understand, you received from one of your teachers. I think they're very powerful and a wonderful way to lay a foundation. And so those 4 core principles of death work are: death is the teacher, letting go is the art we aim to master, the lessons taught by uncertainty far outweigh any other lesson, and the calling to the work lays the work out for us.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can just move through those in a fluid, natural way. But of course, death is the teacher, is the first. I see that maybe you want to say something, so I'll just pass it over to you and see where
Absolutely.
you're.
I mean, I think what's so interesting about these principles is like they're like when you think about them, you're just like, absolutely. And then when you're moving through them as a human, as all the
Right.
things that we want, that we desire, like it can be hard. It can be hard to like sit in that uncertainty. It can be hard to let death or even because yes, I work with death, but I work also with transformation and change. It can be hard to be in that flow. It can be hard to do that letting go and allowing death to transform you in
Mm.
those ways. And so it's like, yes, it's these principles. And also, these are the toughest lessons I feel like we have as human beings on this planet.
Yeah, yeah. And in a overculture that really just denies death at every chance, this fundament that death is the teacher is really quite radical. It's an old idea, but it's new in the context of the overculture that we are embedded within. And so how has, because that I think is radical, how has that really radicalized you, so to say? And I just want to invoke the etymology of radical, which originally means to be rooted, and so we'll tag that on there as well.
Mhm.
And one second,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
I'm noticing that one of my mics for some reason isn't picking up audio, so just give me one moment
you're good.
while I check why that would be the case. Because it's off. That makes sense.
That'll do it.
That makes sense. Okay, here we go. So let's try that again now with audio. Okay,
Yay.
so I'll just pass it over to you there then.
Yeah. So when I think about like how I mean, I think it for me, it's trying to figure out like what was first. Like, was it that radicalization or was it like the death and leaning into death? And one of the things that because part of my death teaching was a 9-month deaf midwifery apprenticeship, I had a long time to actually sit with these questions and actually look at my past and look at the root of like who I am. And so I see it, I see that radicalization as a queer youth. I used to be a queer youth organizer,
Mhm.
and some of the things that we, would organize around, think about like, Matthew Shepard being murdered. And we would literally organize die-ins in our community. We would teach each other like how to like lay still, on how to pretend to be dead,
Mm,
to create signs, bringing awareness to the danger in society of being an out queer person. And so like I think about like that route, that there was already death work happening. I was already doing death midwifery work, whether I saw it as that or not.
yeah.
And so like that community piece, that like we're fighting for our lives piece, is what drives my death work. When I think about, you know, when I think about death and I think about dying and how I want to die, it actually brings me closer to how I want to live. It brings me closer to like, who do I want around me? What values am I embodying in my life, in my home, in my relationships? And it just brings me that much closer to being human, and being human in a way that, that makes me think about like, what kind of ancestor do I want to be? What legacy do I want to leave on this earth that is in line with how I love the earth and how I love my fellow humans and animals and plants, but yeah, so that's like when I think about that root and I think about like that radicalness, I think about being as human as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, so beautifully said. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about how your experience as a queer youth has carried forward. You just kind of mentioned it there, and that's so
Mhm.
interesting to me. I'd love to hear you speak to that more, how that's carried forward into your death work today.
Absolutely. So I think, when I think about being, I'm in my like early 40s. And so I grew up at a time where there wasn't gay marriage. There wasn't,
No.
a lot of the rights that we have right now in the United States. And I say the United States because that's where I'm at. Like these were things that were pipe dreams, things that we could only imagine happening if, that was even something that we wanted for ourselves. So when I think about the ways in which I was able to be in a community of like, oh, these things aren't necessarily available to us, but we can dream that one day they'll be available to us.
Mm,
It also reminds me of being Black here in the United States. Like there are things that, now, today in 2025, that we take for granted, that, things that my mom and dad, my grandparents, my great grandparents couldn't have even imagined. Maybe they dreamed, but they couldn't have imagined it necessarily being real. And
mm,
so, and part of that too is community. Like I think about my community. I think about how queerness defines the ways in which we cling tight to our friend circles, like our friends as family.
mm,
um, I think about, we have here in our community, we have Jewish death workers who work with trans folks who are passing, to give them the proper burial for who they are culturally and
mm,
religiously. And so think about the ways in which being queer or being trans makes you other, that like, where you're forced to find in many ways, for still many people, like, my parents accept me, but I know so many queer and trans youth who are very much estranged from their families of origin. And so clinging tight to community, to creating community, and being um, imaginative around it. I think about the folks who are polyamorous and they're like, oh, like, here are all of my beloveds, and we live on a farm here in Western Mass. Whatever that looks like, people are finding ways to like stretch their imagination and to create the worlds that they want to live and love in. And
mm,
so I feel like that's part of what's shaped like being a queer youth, of like knowing how much we've gained and knowing what we have to lose and knowing how important it is to create community is part of so much of what drives me and shapes me. It shapes my death work, and all the other ways in which I show up in community.
Really appreciate all that. Yeah. Um, you mentioned like moving toward community. You even said like clinging to community, and yet this art of letting go is
Mhm.
so central to death work. But of course, thinking of queer folks, there must be inherent in the sociocultural challenges of being queer. There must be inherent within that the necessity of letting go in order to move toward that which is more coherent. Um, I'd love to hear you speak to that too.
when when I think about that, like for myself, I think about, probably one of my latest beloveds, and part of the ways in which we moved together was like, oh, we really love and adore one another, and also we don't want to cling, like not like we don't want to hold so tight to like what we think the form of us should be, that we become rigid and ultimately end up like crushing like what it is. And so we kind of hold tight with that open hand.
Mm,
And so that's like part of it. It's not like, oh, you know, like we know people come and go. I've had my own friendship breakups, like where it's just like, oh no, we actually have to let go, even though I
mhm,
thought you would be in my life until I died. And so I think that there's like parts of it to where how can we love each other enough to where we feel free?
mhm,
And so there's like, oh, there's this commitment to community, but also not commitment to pushing each other into a hole that like renders us frozen or not valued for being our wild selves.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, and the the gripping, like I love that. What did you use? Is
The
like
open hand.
gripping, but with like yeah, an open hand or like a looseness that allows a responsivity, right? It's when we're clinging and gripping so hard that you're actually not resilient. You can't respond and be adaptive to what's asked of you. And I'm reminded of Dan Millman, this Olympic medalist, and he wrote a book on performance that changed my life because um, uh, I've had various movement practices throughout my life, and one of the things he shared in that book was when you're engaging in a movement, just engage that which is necessary and
Mm,
notice all the other parts of you that are
mhm.
holding, gripping, tightening, strengthening
Yeah.
that are absolutely unnecessary for that particular movement.
Right.
And I noticed this changed my life immediately after I went for a bike ride, cross country bike ride. And I tried to loosen all the parts of me that weren't needed to move on rough terrain. And it
Mhm.
utterly changed the way that I moved across the landscape with my bike,
Oh,
like profoundly so. And I think this is what you're speaking to too, that we can have that in relationship with others, but also with ourselves too, right? Where do we cling? Where do we tighten? Where do we hold on to? Where do we engage parts of ourselves that are unnecessary and that are actually eating us up and taking away vital energy that can be used more fluently, more appropriately to what's actually being asked of us.
I love that. So I have a daily devotional practice, and one of the cards that I pulled today was the Eight of Swords.
Mm,
And so the Eight of Swords, for folks who aren't into tarot, like there is a figure. They are, the blindfold is falling off. They're kind of loosely tied up, and there are swords in the ground all around them, 8 swords. And when I think about this card to me is like in that same space of like, what can you release? Like, what restrictions can you release on your life, on your mind? Like, you are no longer being held prisoner. You could easily, get free yourself, grab a sword, and keep charging ahead, or whatever it is you want to do. Like, are, you have the power, you have the tools, and you just need to like give up what was to be in what is or what could be.
Yeah, yeah. Which, of course, when we're moving through any death experience, especially that last culminative moment in this lifetime of actual physical death, that is, as these four core principles, this one, letting go, as an art that is needing to master, that is so key, right? It's just,
Yeah.
but part of that, I think, right, you're speaking to letting go of what was in order to be with what is, that might be, it's kind of easy to say, and maybe at a practic or at one level of consciousness it might be easy to do, but at the
Yeah.
same rate, if you're held back by unfinished business, you know, um, like grievances, things that are asking for forgiveness, so on and so forth, that letting go of what was now becomes so much more difficult
Mhm,
to do, and
mhm,
to really sincerely offer yourself at that final moment.
I think about so I am a tantra meditation instructor, and
Mm,
I was in a mentorship session with my mentor. And one of the things that she said, and this wasn't the focus of our mentorship session at that time, but she just kind of said it offhand, was like, um, the breath and our relationship to the breath prepares us for death. And there was something in me that was just like, oh, that, that right there. And it has stuck with me as like, oh, like yes, it's our breath, our relationship to the breath, but it's also the relationship to people. It's our relationship to how we hold on to grief, to anger, to fear. It's our relationship to how do we be an upright relationship with the people that we care about. And much in the same way, because yeah, I'm also flower a flower tender, land tender. Like, what's our relationship to the earth? um, like how we tend to our relationships in life will also point us towards how those may show up in death, or also in birth.
yeah.
All the things that remain unsaid or unfinished, like these are the portals in which they show up.
Mm,
And it can be hard to be brave and to see that and to face that. Um, it can be scary to forgive. It can be scary to be like, I don't know what's on the other side. And I'm terrified to no longer exist. And so all of these questions are things that I feel we should be exploring long before. Yeah, again, none of us knows when we're going to go. At least most of us don't know when we're going to go. But by exploring these questions now, by exploring our relationship, and that's what I feel, it's a relationship to death. It actually creates the space for us to start thinking about those questions now, so that when we're like in it, we're not taken off guard. We're not like stuck in the like, I haven't thought about this, I don't want to think about this, like but like being in a place of like, oh, I've thought about this. I've cried about this. I've worried about this. I've planned this. And I'm still scared. But I
mhm.
have like things, I have practices, I have understandings that I can work with and partner with as I make that transition.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'd love to talk about the lessons taught by uncertainty, but I just want to mention that I'm very grateful you brought the breath in, because I just want to open up an inquiry for all of us here, which is your breath is a passageway. Your contemplation, your connection, your conscious connection with your breath is a passageway into so much, actually, because of course you don't live without your breath, right?
Mhm.
You just
Mhm.
hold it, like your breath is taken for brief moments and you die. So there's that, just like, fundamental aspect of it. Another fundamental aspect is that it's cyclical.
Mhm.
So you're breathing in and you're breathing out. And the more consciousness you bring to it, the more you can recognize where you get, where you lose that fluidity of the cycle. And of course, any cycle is a doorway into recognizing the infinite cycles that
Yep.
make up our cosmos. And of course, your breath is produced by our plant nation kin, right?
Mhm.
And it's regulated by this biosphere. And so there's all these layers that the breath invites us into. It also connects us in a conscious way to our nervous system and allows us to deepen into relationality with all the different bio-cycle functioning of our body. It allows us to connect with others through that way as well. So just so important, and of course it makes a whole lot of sense that if you want to die with as much conscious awareness and connection as possible, that your breath would be an absolute essential ally for that. But yeah, I'd love to hear, that third core principle is that the lessons taught by uncertainty far outweigh any other lesson.
Oof.
And um, I was speaking with who was it? I think it was Nyla Francis the other day, and I said, I think the scariest thing about death, or about grief, sorry, is the uncertainty, that we don't know what grief is going to do to us,
Mm, mm,
right? But
mhm.
the thing is we never really know what's going to happen ever anyways. and so, and
Sometimes
so
we think we can.
yeah. And so really uncertainty, like, is one of the greatest teachers. And I would say uncertainty and death, as you were naming in your own way, are deeply interwoven sisters. And so I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the lessons that you've been taught that have been profound in relationship with uncertainty?
Whew. Uncertainty is not my favorite.
Yeah.
At all. Here's the thing. It's the only constant. Like it's it's the only constant. And still, like I would love to control things. I would like to know, like where's my next, meal coming from? What's my next paycheck coming from? Like there's so many things that we do, so many rituals we create. Both mundane rituals for those of us, who get up and go to work every day, to some of the more esoteric ones, like reading tarot cards. Like there's so many ways that for us as humans, like, we tussle with, we fight uncertainty. And it's something that for me, like when I think about the lessons that uncertainty has taught me, has been like, again, that like, oh, I still don't have control. Like, even though I could read the cards, and guess what? I've been reading since I was a kid. So it's something that, it's a language, tarot is a language that feels very close to me. And yeah, that thing happened, but it didn't quite happen in the way that I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like this thing happened. Yeah, I guess I could read that interpretation. Okay, got you. The universe always has jokes as much as it has love. And so that's, I think, is one of those big things for me that I've learned is that, that uncertainty is the constant. And, when I talk about because I also have a background as a full spectrum doula. So we talk about, birth plans versus birth preferences. And it's the very same with death. It's like, oh, here's my death plan. Like I would like my kin, my heart kin, my family kin, whomever is around to wash and adorn my body. I want
Mm,
them to wrap me in a shroud. I want them to celebrate. And I could die in a way where that's not possible.
mm, mhm,
I could, whatever, I could be continents away, and that just may not work for the timing and the money that, my loved ones have.
yeah.
Um, I want to be buried in like a conservation forest, like not 6 feet under in a metal box covered, with concrete. I want to be able to like return to the earth and like what that looks like. Like, I don't know what that'll look like. I don't know what plants are going to um, be nourished by my body, which ones are going to pop up, or if anybody's ever going to visit,
Mm, mm,
and also in that uncertainty of like the how and the when and the why is this commitment to understanding that what is going to happen is what's going to happen. And it doesn't change how I live my life. It doesn't change my values. Like
mm,
the uncertainty of life doesn't change the fact that I love me, that I am my own beloved, that I care about the earth and I want to be buried in a way that honors the earth. It doesn't change the way that, like, oh, I want to be, a responsible citizen in my community. So I'm always going to make sure that I have extra for others. It doesn't change the fact that so much of my medicine as a herbalist or as a healer, I often give away. And so like that uncertainty for me just means like, oh, I need to be way more committed to my values,
mm.
because I have no control over anything else, but I do have, you know, as best as possible control over my mind, which, sit me down in a meditation session. This is a whole nother conversation, but
Right.
generally, uh, generally, I have, control over how I show up in relationships.
Yeah.
I have control over the work that I put in the world, like how hard, or how much I go off trail when I'm hiking so that I'm not messing up, the different plants that are out there. Like these are things that are like, even within the uncertainty, these are for me, these rituals feel important to if we're going to cling to anything, like we cling to how we want to show up in the world. We cling to like our responsibility to our values and to the land and to the earth and to the spirits and the ancestors, both past and present and future. And so that's, for me, I feel like that's the lesson, is like,
Mm.
it's going to look how it's going to look. But I want to go to sleep knowing that I did my best to live up to my values and the things that I care about and the people that I care about.
Yeah. So beautifully said. I fully agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. In the face of uncertainty, there are deep, nearly eternal aspects of who we are, who we know ourselves to be, that we can meet those moments of change and discontinuity or disruption, and still be connected to what we understand is the essence of who we are, or who we've become or who we're becoming. It's so beautiful, so important.
Yeah. And
So,
I think one of my prayers is, when I think about, like if I'm in a hard moment with a beloved, is like my prayer going into our time together is, help me to remember myself when I'm in fear.
mm,
And for me, that is like central to like that is that in a nutshell. Like when we're thinking about, part of my work is I'm a grief worker. When I think about like grief, like part of grief sometimes feels like you forget all the other things. Like you kind of get taken over by the wave of grief, and you forget you can forget the love. Like you can
mm,
forget that like grief and love swim in the same waters, like they are kin.
mm-hmm,
And it's the same way, because so much of death, when we think about death, is about grief, is about the life we lived or didn't live, the people we love that we'll miss, the things whew, that we said
yeah,
or didn't say,
yeah,
like here are all these things, like what when you're looking back on your life, you're looking back on like, oh, how did I live? How
mm-hmm,
did I live? How did I love? And can I access that love even though I'm terrified to leave? And I feel like I feel that in the everyday, not just in death, but every day. Like, how are we tending to how we show up and remembering that we are love and we are loved?
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, so important. And I think in line with this, the lessons that are taught by uncertainty, you mentioned fear, and that's got to be one of the bigger aspects of that constellation of lessons that uncertainty offers us, is to see fear more clearly and to learn how to move with it, through it when it arises. And
Mhm.
I'd love to hear you speak more to that. Um, yeah, specifically like the dance with fear, and as well, and but connecting it I guess all fear is connected to uncertainty, really, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's just, that's what it is. It's just like, I don't know how this is going to go, and I'm scared about the possible outcomes, and
right,
really maybe
right.
I don't trust that I can make it through this with an outcome that I would hope for. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like when I think about fear, I mean, I I don't know, like, I mean, fear just feels natural. Like it feels just like it's a part of life. And it's again not my favorite thing to feel.
Yeah.
But it's something that like I have a lot of relationship with. I have a relationship with fear, and I feel like this is something that I think is important for everyone is to can you talk to your fear? Can you name your fear? Can you ask it, like, what does it need to be seen, to be held, to be tamed, to be whatever? What is your fear calling you towards? Um, is it about things just changing in general or just things changing in a specific way?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think, think about like soul retrieval work or like parts work,
Mm,
however you want to call it. Like fear shows up a lot. Fear shows up in, fear and disappointment. I feel like that's a big one. Like, oh, like I am scared of this because of this experience in the past. And I was so disappointed. I was so
mm,
heartbroken. And granted, we don't want to be heartbroken. At least I don't know, maybe somebody does. I feel like I've gone through a lot of heartbreak in my life. And
mm,
oftentimes some of my fears directly related to like, I don't want my heart broken again because I don't know where the bottom is.
mm.
I don't know, like how deep is my heartbreak going to take me? And like when you feel that showing up, like you're just like you're overcome. And so I feel like when I think about fear and when I feel myself coming into fear, like I try my best. Now, granted, I try my best. This in life in general, I try my best.
I believe.
Um, to like see it and be like,
Yeah.
oh, what? Okay, what's going on? What's
Hmm.
happening? What are you afraid of? Okay, can you talk about that? What
Mm,
else? What else is coming up? What happens if it goes this way?
yeah,
Like, and really, again, I think this is the word of the month for me. Is like beloved. Like, can
mm,
you treat your fear as a beloved?
mm,
Can you look it in its eyes and be like, hey, I'm here. I
right.
care about you. What do you need?
Yeah,
And tend to it like you would a beloved.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like just as death is one of our greatest allies in this life, so too can fear be. And I think part of the issue is usually around fearing fear itself rather than
Right.
the actual
Right.
territory that that fear is holding us back from, that we're just scared of actually going into that unsettling feeling. But the
Oh
thing
yeah.
is that it's actually just a veneer. Once you
Mm,
go through it, there's a complex territory of so much information that you can engage with and utilize to actually help you along your path. There's wisdom
mhm,
and intelligence there. I'm reminded of something that Stephen Levine says. Of course, he's one of the kind of elders of modern day death work. He sat with thousands of people as they're dying, and he said, there is nothing to fear in fear.
mm,
Enter it. Begin
mhm.
to relate to it rather than solely from it.
Yeah.
Do not fear fear. Soften that compulsive resistance. Fear of fear is ignorance of fear.
Mm, 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 mm.
Fear of fear is ignorance of fear.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so real. And I think that that's like, when I feel like I have, again, I have my own fears. I am a human
For sure.
being.
Yeah.
And like, as I like step into this work, sometimes it's challenging to be like, oh, I'm gonna be the one who's like, coming in to talk about death,
Right.
which
Right.
so many people like want to run from, don't want to think about. My own parents don't want to have a conversation with me about death. Okay. Um, and
Yeah.
and so there is that vulnerability of like walking into a space and being like, oh, I'm here to talk about death. And I'm probably going to be laughing half the time because like I get excited about this. Like I get excited about thinking around like, oh, who do I want to have around me when I'm dying?
Mm,
Who do I want to like tap into that community of people? Like it actually, when I think about death, I think about hope in this like very real way. And it makes me like super joyful to think about it. And also, of course I'm not, if somebody is actively dying, it's a whole nother, whole
yeah.
nother phase comes up. But like when it's just like, oh, we're like in a space and people are like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, ah. That for me it's just like, oh, like, and I think about all the things that I've done as an herbalist, as a meditation instructor, as a farmer, as as someone who has like worked with the land, worked with the plant spirits, and worked with folks in some of their most vulnerable moments. Like that, I feel like that joy of service and that joy of helping people walk towards uncertainty
Mm,
um, and their own fear of being able to like hold their hand and walk them through this threshold is that it's sacred work. It's important work, and it's work that may we all have somebody to walk us through that threshold. And that's my prayer.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And by becoming more death literate, whether death work is your calling in this lifetime, you're just becoming a better support in your immediate, circles. And like Ram Dass, I'm reminded how he says we're all just walking each other home. And so, the more death literate we become, no matter who we are, the more wholesomely we're going to be able to companion those we love who are undoubtedly going to die one day. But I feel similarly to what you expressed, which is I often feel like a hopefulness and a joy and even a lightness when contemplating death and my death. I think there's many reasons to that, but again, I'm reminded how Ram Dass says death is like taking off an old shoe, and I get that kind of somatic feeling when I am able to feel into my own death and contemplate it. That to me it feels like a kind of like a freeing, an opportunity to be liberated in some important ways. Of course, I'm willing and excited to wait for that to come, but
Yes.
that is a really empowering experience or orientation to cultivate over time, is to actually look at your death as a liberatory process. Because if you can, then that means it's liberating you now. Because, of course, every moment is dying into the next, and we're offered ample opportunity to die unto ourselves and who we thought we were in order to become
Yes,
something new,
yes.
right? Yeah,
So many deaths, let me tell you. Like
yeah,
I have been through them all. And I think that this is like, one of the things that when I'm working with folks or talking with folks about my work, it's like, and my work as a whole, not just like as a death midwife, because I've done a lot of work around grief, pregnancy, and infant loss. And
yeah,
so I've been doing this work before for many years. And there are so many ways in which we die and
yeah,
will die
yeah,
again and again and again
yeah,
throughout the course of our lives if we're doing it right.
yeah,
I think about, you know, 15-year-old me. I think about 25-year-old me, like just like all these different like iterations of Jovan that had to die to like bring in this next iteration of who I am, of how I love, of who I love, and how I show up in the world. And I love that, like, yes, absolutely, I would love folks to hire me. And also, the goal is we should all be more death literate. We should
yeah,
all be able to be with our most beloved people and to support them. And sometimes it happens because people study, or sometimes you're just called into it. I think about, my aunt is a lesbian, and grew up during like she was an adult during the AIDS crisis, and
oh,
a lot of, for her community, this is what happened. The lesbians showed up for a lot of the gay men who were dying.
mm,
And they didn't go through a certification program to like help
right,
folks like meet their death. The
mm,
need was there, the love was there, the commitment to community was there, and they showed up.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And
yeah,
so again, may we all like show up to support one another in
yeah,
good ways.
yeah, truly. So the fourth core principle is the calling to the work lays the work out for us. I think we have a bit of a sense, but I'd love to hear more directly the calling to the work for you. what was that? How was that laying the work out for you? This
Mm,
of being with death and dying.
there's so many layers to
I
this.
bet. Yes.
I think about holding my mom's hand as she cried, as she miscarried my younger sibling.
Mm,
I think about the fear, the tears, all of that that came forward as I just like held her hand. Um, and I think about my own pregnancy loss.
mm,
And I had a miscarriage, and so my body held on to the little, and how that that death, that portal, birthed me into my own healing and my own birth work as a birth worker,
mm,
and how many times I've like held somebody's hand or held space for somebody who was going through a loss, whether that was an actual death or it was just the death of a dream that they had.
mm,
And so I feel like there's not like one initiation. I feel like there's been initiation after initiation after initiation that's been pulling me back to myself and pulling me back to what I am here to do and the space that I'm here to hold. Um, and so yeah, so it looks so different. I think about former partner that I used to live with. Like I was brought into their family, and their grandmother, who was 96, who lived right next door to us. I think about her end of life, ending up going on hospice, and being there with her. Um, but also the like there was joy for her, and also she had planned her funeral down to the program and who was going to sing the solo, um, like prepaid and everything. I was like, what a gift, what
wow.
a gift. And so yeah, and everybody was sad, and we had a repast at the house where we were feeding everybody, and there was sadness, but there was also joy. There
Mm,
was like missing, but there was also the remembering. And so like that part of it for me, like those initiations, like both the personal ones that are close to me and my family and myself, but also those that I've been invited to in community and as a worker, as a grief worker, as a death worker, and that each one continues to initiate me into this work.
hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm reminded of how it's usually the initiatory processes that we go through uniquely that are ours, that inherently have some sense of dismemberment, right? That we're
Mm-hmm.
taken apart, and it's painful, and then we have to, hopefully with the support of kin and community, that we then put ourselves back together in a new configuration, but that also still carries the wounds of that experience. But it's that remaking of ourselves with the wounds and all that allows us to feel and understand and see more clearly how to be of service in our unique way, that that is guided by those difficult, threshold threshing experiences. And that very evidently is how you've chosen to walk your path, and thank you for sharing all of that. If someone listening is feeling any kind of call to um, inquire
Mm-hmm.
at all, or even more deeply into death work in any capacity, but they're afraid or unsure of where to begin, what would you say to them?
Oh, I mean, I feel like this is multi-layered. I feel like, I think about the practice of yoga nidra. Um, and can you find ways to like sit with yourself and sit with your own death? Can you tend to and listen to what's coming up for you? And of course, there's books. There's lots of books out there. There's training programs. Like I love my mentor Narinder is an amazing death worker and has their own podcast. But I feel like one of the things that I always, even though yes, I have absolutely been birthed into my work by my own threshold moments. I feel like, and this is definitely one of the things that I did, I feel like it's important for people to like tend to the self, like see what's coming up for you before you're like, let me go take that training.
Mm, right.
Um,
Keep it
and
close.
yeah,
Yeah.
keep it like start there, start with the breaking of your own heart before you have to tend to other people's broken hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's something, for those of us who are like, highly sensitive, who care about the world, that so many times we can be like, oh, here's this heartbreaking thing. I'm going to go read a book, do a training, and like start working with people. And we kind of bypass like our own broken heart. Like we use the work to tend to our broken heart. And I want there to be more people in the world who are being tender with themselves around this, who are like, learning about like, oh, not just about, the gates of grief, but like your relationship to what your own grief. Like, can you look at yourself, look at your grief, look at your uncertainty, and tend to it in the most beautiful and tender ways? Um, and then be like, okay, great. What what does my heart want me to do now? And that's my advice. That's
That's so, yeah, that's incredible advice. It's so important because I think that um, oftentimes us humans these days can get very excited about engaging in action, be very action oriented because we have goals and outcomes and things that we would like to affect in the world. And that's essential. That's super
yeah,
important.
absolutely.
I think that that can sometimes take over though, and even be a bit of a substitute for slowing down and inquiring within, um, that we can go outwards instead of inwards, right? Rather than both. And I think what your invitation so eloquently is asking, inviting, is, well, but if you just slow down and just inquire within and really um, sense into the layers and the multifaceted nature of your heart and its brokenness and the beauty therein, that your draw toward whatever your work is in the world, but especially being with death and dying, and those who are and companioning those who are experiencing that, that it's going to be much more, it's going to be deeper, richer, more rooted, and more probably capable to be with others in an
Absolutely.
authentic, deep way. Because I think something that happens often when folks meet others who are in a deep grief portal is that you want to try and fix it. You want them to
Fix it.
feel better, which I think has to do with death illiteracy, grief illiteracy, recognizing that there's nothing to fix ever, actually, that there's nothing wrong with it, but because we have the fear of just entering that space of uncertainty, right? Then
Right.
we want to direct it. And so that's part
Exactly.
of the inquiry within, is like, look at the parts of you where you want to fix things and direct things and have things
Mhm.
neat and tidy and sweet outcomes to lean toward, but and notice how that's actually just a drive to not sit in the
Yes,
uncertainty,
yes,
not
yes.
sit with the
Well, and when I think about my work as a death midwife or, our other death doulas, like so much of our work is about slowing it down.
yeah,
Like slow it down. Like put on a pot of tea, like move as slow and as intentional as you can.
yeah,
Because, death isn't going anywhere. But these like moments that we have with one another, like require like the like, again, we were talking about this earlier, like that need to like be in action, to be in motion, to like, oh, we got to get all these things done. That's not death work. That's not
right,
death work.
right,
Death work is like, oh, like we actually get to like the invitation is to sit with death, to sit with the stillness, and to be like for ourselves as death workers to be steady in that stillness. Like we are
mm,
here to like support other people, and and like yes, we had go through our own things, we are also human, but like in that moment, like it's not fully about us.
yeah,
And so, can we hold space, and not be kind of doing our own internal spiral? Can we sit in those pauses? And I think about this the same thing as when you're for those who are like meditation instructors or breathwork facilitators or whatever, like the impetus is to fill like all here's all the instruction, like I'm gonna keep talking, versus like no, you actually need to like invite in space, invite in pause, like not talk so much, like allow the stillness to be, because that's where the grief is.
yeah, 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 really well said. Okay, Jovan, I'm doing this new thing. I'm trying this new thing out to basically just create community around this project.
Mhm.
And so I'm putting some things up on Substack because that seems to be a great platform for building community. And so something I'm doing with some of the interviews is I'm asking like one more question at the end that isn't put into the regular podcast feed, but will
Got
be
it.
only on Substack.
Yeah.
So let's end this part by I'd like to invite you to share whatever you'd like to share to wrap this
Mhm.
up and direct people toward anything you'd like to direct them toward. And then I'll ask you one more question, and that'll be on the Substack.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah. I mean, for me, when I think about death work and when I want other people to think about death work, I do like I want people to think about their relationship with themselves and their lives, with their animal and plant kin, with their beloveds, whoever those are. Um,
Mm,
and to think about like being able to look at the fear, look at the grief, but also look at the love and find a way forward together. Have these conversations, not just with other like death workers, but like have the uncomfortable conversations with your parents,
mhm,
with your partner, uh, like your friends. Like your friends should know how you want to die. Um,
mhm,
if they're good, if they're good friends, I feel like they should know that.
mhm,
Um, and to like be like find ways to be in community. Like the same way that like we're not meant to hold grief in one body, like we're not meant to hold death by ourselves. Like yes, this death, when we die, we are on this very real solo journey in so many ways, but it's a journey that is held up by community. And so that's so important for us to remember and to act like it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Wonderful. Do you wanna direct people to any of your offerings or
Yeah. I would so one of the things that I just launched is I'm doing at least monthly. I may do it more, but a monthly Death Mother Circle. So for me, the way that my work is guided is by this idea of the Death Mother, which is like love and grief and death all in one. Um, and so folks can go to my website, deathmother.com. These are just free circles where, again, like I open up the field, we get to talk, you get to ask whatever questions you have around death and grief, transformation, whatever is on your heart and mind in that moment. It is not a place to process grief. I do have resources for that. If folks need that, can reach out. I do hold space for folks one-on-one, both as a grief worker and as a death worker. So those are all available at deathmother.com. And you can also find me on Instagram. It's just my full name, Jovan Sage. Um, I post a lot in stories, sometimes on the grid, but as we know, it's just another fun digital space for me to like share my work with the world and to share my broken heart with the world.
Mm, mm. Oh, Jovan, thank you for being here in this way. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a lovely conversation. Thank you for opening up the field.